I read a total of 136 books in 2024. And so I'm going to be giving you guys one-line reviews of each book that I read in 2024. Let's get started. Hello, my name is Anvita. Welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, hi, my name is Anvita. I love to read books, I love to talk about books, and today, as I mentioned, I will be giving you guys one-line reviews, or just not even reviews. I'm just gonna give you guys my final thoughts on each book that I read in 2024. And I read 136 books in 2024, so this is gonna take a while, but I'm gonna try to get through them as quickly as possible. So the first book that I read in 2024, started out strong, was Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. This was my first book by R.F. Kuang, and this kind of felt like reading a train wreck, like watching a train wreck happen. Like it started out well and then just progressed as a train wreck. The second book was The Getaway List by Emma Lord. This was probably like my fourth or fifth Emma Lord, and I enjoyed it just as much as the others. Yeah, it was fun. I don't remember a whole lot, but I remember enjoying it, and I think the romance in it was really good. And I think it was set in New York City, so that was fun to read about as well. So third book, again, R.F. Kuang. So I read Fable by R.F. Kuang as the third book of 2024. This was my favorite book of January, and I loved it, but the ending was not fun. I really liked the world building and the writing and everything, but the ending was not good. Anyways, fourth book was The Mystery Guest by Nita Prose. This was the second book in Molly the Maid series. I enjoyed this one, but much less than the first one, and it felt really predictable. But I still had a good time because it was cozy mystery. So the next book I read was What You Are Looking For Is in the Library by Michiko Aoyama, and this one was pretty good, but it felt lacking because I wanted to know more. I wanted more connection between the stories, and I wanted to know more about the librarian and her life and use that to like connect to each of the stories, which I think other Japanese translated works do better. So this was good, but it felt lacking. Next was And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. I was doing an Agatha Christie, like I would read one Agatha Christie a month, and then I stopped that I think in like June. So I read like a couple books by Agatha Christie this year. And Then There Were None was the first one I read. And this one was good, but the hype was so much that I was expecting more. It's good in the way that like the author was able to make the mystery of it, but like reading it like did not feel as new and refreshing, I guess. Next I read How to Kill Men and Get Away with It by Katie Brent. And this one was so good. It was hard to get into at first because the narrator's voice is so annoying, but it was still so good. I was genuinely scared to read this at home, and so I read it at cafes, and I was still like so shocked. I should not have been reading it in public. Like my face expressions was probably insane. But yeah, very good. Next I read One for My Enemy by Olivia Blake. This one was really good. It's inspired by Romeo and Juliet. It has Koschei the Darkness and Baba Yaga, and like that in like a modern New York setting, but also like new Romeo and Juliet vibes. Like I don't know how to explain it, but it's really good. There's a lot happening. There's a lot of angst, and the writing is beautiful as always. So next I read Really Good Actually by Monica Hasey, and this one I didn't pick up myself. Like my sister bought this book, and so it was at home, and I was like, why not try it? And so I did, and it was fun, but I think I would have enjoyed this more like if I read this a couple years later, like maybe in my 30s or something, because I couldn't relate to it much, but like it was funny. Like it was funny, which is why I enjoyed it, but I think I would have loved it even more if I read it in my 30s. So next I read Thorn Hedge by T. Kingfisher, and I really enjoyed this. It was a short story, and it was like a subversion of like magical stories like Princess in the Tower, all these things. A fun magical time. Next I read Death on the Nile by Agatha Christie, and this one I think was my least favorite out of all the Agatha Christie books I read in 2024. The mystery wasn't catching me, and then also the ending was just not fun, and like emotional aspect of it did not catch me. I don't know, it just wasn't for me. Next, I read The Catch by Amy Lee. This is the third book in her influencer series, and this was my least favorite of the series, and also one of the most disappointing books I read this year, because I enjoyed the first book the most in the series. The second was okay, and then this one was not it. It felt like she was trying to force the enemies to lovers to happen, and it just wasn't happening, and there was no reason for them to hate each other. Next, I read Right on Cue by Fallon Ballard, and this one I enjoyed. I have read a couple books by Fallon Ballard, and I think this one was the least fave, but like it was still good. I think the thing I enjoyed a lot in this was the romance. The friendship that was shown in it was lacking, and like definitely needed to be worked on more. If there was, since there was conflict in that, like those things like brought it down for me, but like the romance was good. Next, I read Hockey Girl Loves Drama Boy by Faith Erin Hicks. This was a graphic novel, and it was super cute, super fast read. Next, I read Evil Eye by Etta Frum, and this was so good, so well written, so wow, like I loved it, and it was just so realistic and so well done. Multi-generational work, Palestinian, Palestinian American point of view, representation of like workplace harassment and like just family dynamics and like immigrant stories, and just so many good representation, and just done so well. And next, I read The Near Witch by V.E. Schwab. This was, I think, the first book V.E. Schwab ever released, from what I remember. Reading this and seeing this book made me also see like how much her writing has changed. Just her writing style and voice and stuff have shifted over the years with her like other books that are like my actual favorites by her and stuff. So it was really interesting to see that, and I did enjoy it overall, but I don't think it's something I will remember much. Next, I read Interior Chinatown by Charles Yu. This was so good. I was being mind blown, like I was feeling mind blown, like page after page. Like I was like it's so good. The entire book is written in screenwriting format. Everyone go read it right now. That's my one-line review on it. Next, I read Forever Interrupted by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I think I binge read this in like a day. That's pretty much it. I don't have much to say. It's emotional and it's contemporary, a lot of talks about grief. Next, I read Mother Country by Etta Frum. This was a short story and very similar in terms of themes and, the stuff it talks about compared to Evil Eye, and enjoyed this as well. The writing is great. Next was Cleopatra and Frankenstein by Coco Mellors. I did not enjoy this. This was not my kind of book. I like flawed characters, but I need to still want to root for them and want to feel things for them, and I didn't feel anything for these characters. Anyways, next was Girl in White Cotton, or another name for the book is Burnt Sugar by Avni Doshi. I loved this. This was insane. I was reading this and I was like, I can't believe this author wrote this. Yeah, mother-daughter relationships to the extreme. Like, yeah, especially like Asian household and like a lot of other things. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I read it really fast, I think. Next was Even If This Love Disappears Tonight by Ichijo Misaki. This was a fairly quick read. Again, like very similar to like a lot of like anime type movies that I've seen. The writing is so simplistic that the emotional aspect didn't like come through fully for me, but it was still a good, enjoyable read. Next, I read Beyond the Story, the BTS memoir / 10-year record of BTS. Like, it made me emotional to read more in-depth, like, personal stories from the members about events and, like, incidents from their 10 years as BTS. Next, I read Fangirl Down by Tessa Bailey. This was okay. There were some cringy moments. I did enjoy it in some aspects, but then midway through, I was like skimming through it because it just got really cringy and the main guy kind of gave me the ick. So yeah. Next was The Murder of Roger Ackroyd by Agatha Christie. This was my favorite Agatha Christie book. I really enjoyed the narration in this. I really enjoyed the way it was told and the way the mystery was revealed. If you want to start out Agatha Christie, I would recommend this one. Next was Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. This was so good. I haven't read Hellbent yet, but I need to read it. The ending, or like the reveal, I guess. I did predict a bit of it, but like I was still like shocked about some things. And so I'm excited to continue the series whenever we have more news about book 3, because I cannot do the waiting game. So next I read The Kamogawa Food Detectives by Hisashi Kashiwai. This did have the like connection between, like, we know more about the daughter and the dad who run the restaurant and everything. We know more about them, but I wanted more. Next, I read The Palace of Illusions by Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni, and this was so good. This was my first book by her. I need to read more books by her. This was so good. I really enjoyed it, and just reading the Hindu epic from, you know, the female perspective, from the female main character point of view and stuff was really, really good. And then next, I've been making, like, I started with Near Witch with Viv Schwab, and I've been trying to like make my way through her backlist. And so next 2 books that I read was This Savage Song and Our Dark Duet by V. Schwab. It's the Monsters of Verity duology. I feel like if I read this in like 2013, like high school time, like when I was reading all those like Divergent and like, you know, Hunger Games and like all of that, like this would have been so good for me. I still enjoyed it, but I think I would have enjoyed it way more if I'd read it then. So next I read Ariadne by Jennifer Saint. This is a Greek mythology. I enjoyed it, but I think it was missing some things for me. The writing wasn't pulling me as much, and I think the ending, the way it was spun, I guess, or written, like made it feel lacking. Next, I read After the Funeral by Agatha Christie. This was fun too. I honestly kind of don't remember a whole lot about this right now. It just, at this point, I think I would feel like more that I was forcing myself to read Agatha Christie books and less that I was reading it because I wanted to read it. And so I did enjoy this way more than Death on the Nile for sure, but it was still like, it wasn't memorable. Like I can't remember a whole lot about it. I do remember some things. I do remember the main twist, but I can't really say that because that's a spoiler. But yeah, that's pretty much what I remember. Next, I read She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Chan. And this was so good. Again, Chinese mythology inspired fantasy, and it's queer and it's just so good. I haven't read the second book yet. I do need to do that ASAP. 2025 for sure, because I do have the book, so I need to read it immediately. And yeah, just the writing is so good. It's so well done. The world building is so good. Next, I read All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. World War II inspired historical fiction book. And again, this did not meet my expectations because the hype around this book was so much. But I did love the writing, and I loved the way it like connected towards the end. Like how like all that build up connected was just so well done. And the ending was also beautiful. So I did really enjoy it, but I think my expectations were much higher because of the hype around the book. Next, I read another duology. This was The Monk and Robot duology by Becky Chambers. The first book is A Psalm for the Wild Built, and the second book is A Prayer for the Crowned Shy. This series, this duology was so good and just what I needed at that point. Like, it's science fiction, but it's also like these conversations between a monk and a robot, and like about life, anxieties about the future. Yeah, it was just really comforting to read. So highly recommend if you're looking for a book like that. And then I read In My Dreams I Hold a Knife by Ashley Winstead. This one was also really good. This is again like the kind of book, the mystery is going on and then you find out the mystery at the end, and it was like a great reveal and it was so well done. And then at the end, there's another twist that just leaves you shocked. And it's like at the last page, and I'm just like, yeah. If you want to be shocked, if you want to read a dark academia, alternating timeline, mystery, murder mystery about like college students and stuff, like highly recommend. Highly recommend. I need to read more by this author. Next is the worst book that I read in 2024, and that was We Were Liars by E. Lockhart. I can't believe I read this book. I wish I could delete it from my head. That's all I'll say. I've said a bunch about this in my wrap up in April and in other videos and on my podcast, Characters Like Us podcast. I have mentioned it many, many times. So check those out if you want more detailed thoughts on it, but I hate this book. Anyways, next is Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. This was good. I enjoyed it, but my issue is I was reading this on a plane, and reading about OCD and anxiety in a place where your anxiety could be heightened was not good. So that was rough. I picked this up because I was planning on watching the movie with my friends when I landed, but because I read it and I was already in that anxiety state, it like pushed it further, and I was like, I don't think I can watch the movie right now. I don't think I'm in that space. And so maybe later I'll watch it. Next was Ophelia After All by Raquel Marie. This was my first book by her, and I am obsessed. I loved it. It was so good. It's queer. It's set in high school, and it's about like identity and friendship. It's just so good. Highly recommend. Next was also by Raquel Marie, You Don't Have a Shot. I immediately went and bought this the next day after finishing Ophelia After All because I loved it so much. And this one was even better for me. It's about soccer camp. It's about these two like rivals. And if you know me, you know rivals to lovers is one of my favorite tropes of all time. So I loved it. Next, I read Stars and Smoke by Marie Lu. This is the first book in the series duology. I'm not sure. I know the second book is out. I need to read that. I haven't read it yet. But Stars and Smoke, I enjoyed it. Celebrity and a spy get together to do a mission together, and like it's like assassin spy style YA. It's fun, and the romance was good. The angst was good. Yeah, I needed more. Definitely needed more, which is why I need to read the second book, because I think at least we'll have some progression in that book. So I'm hoping. But yeah, next is one of my favorite books of this year, and that was Legend Born by Tracy Dion. This was the first book in a 4-book series. The third book is coming out in March, and I am so excited. But yeah, I read Legend Born. The entire time my mind was blown. Like, I was shocked. It was so good, and I was loving it throughout. And then the end happened, and I was like, how did it just get better? It was already so good, and it just got even better. And I was like, oh my God. Oh my God. And yeah, next book I read is Don't Want You Like a Best Friend by Emma R. Alban. This is the first book in the series. It was super fun. It's Parent Trap vibes, Regency inspired, queer book. And I read this on audiobook while just walking around LA, and it was super fun. So highly recommend. Next is The Fiancé Farce by Alexandre Bellafleur. As you can tell, this month was a lot of sapphic books. Like, I was in a sapphic binge phase. So anyways, Fiancé Farce, I really enjoyed it. This was also an audiobook, and the audiobook narration was really good. So highly recommend. Then I read The Witch Boy by Molly Knox Ostertag. This was my second book by her, I think, and I really enjoyed it. I love the author's way of like using like fantasy themes, or like, yeah, just fantasy or magic realism themes to like talk about other issues or concepts that's like present in the world. And this one did that as well, and it was so good. It's She Drives Me Crazy by Kelly Quinlan. This I would recommend not reading. One of the main characters is an Indian American high schooler, and it's just I don't like the representation of the Indian character in this. So yeah. Next was Delilah Green Doesn't Care by Ashley Herring Blake. This was my first book by her, and I really enjoyed this. It was really fun, And I also read this as an audiobook. The narration was done well. It was a fun, quick read. Next was Funny You Should Ask by Eliza Sussman. This I really enjoyed while reading it. And then I found out that the author doesn't, like, it's based off of a real interview that happened, and there was no credit given to that or anything acknowledging that, I guess. And I only found out because somebody else put that in their review online. And so next I read When Among Crows by Veronica Roth. This was not my first, obviously. I've read all the Divergent and stuff, but it was me reading one of her works after a really long time. And it's a short story, and I really enjoyed it. And again, this was also inspired by, like, Baba Yaga and Koshe the Darkness. Like, there's like stuff about that, and like there's like folklore. I don't think you should know anything before you go in, because the vibes when you do go in without knowing anything is just so much better. Next, I read Once More with Feeling by Eliza Sussman. Again, I did not know about the issue with Funny You Should Ask, so I ended up reading this because I already had it on Libby. And this one I hated, and I don't even know why I kept going with it once I found out what the trope is about. I enjoyed the writing. The writing was great. Everything was great. And then we get to the trope and we find out the truth, and immediately no. Next was Count Your Lucky Stars by Alexandria Bellafleur. This was the third book in her Written in the Star series, which I started in like 2021 and finally got to this. Like, I've had this book on my TBR for so long, and I finally got to it, and I really enjoyed it. I think I still enjoyed the first and the second book more, but this was good in terms of, like, the themes were similar, which was nice, and also just getting this character's love story after seeing her and rooting for her in the first two books was really nice. Next, I read Mistakes Were Made by Meryl Wilsner. I went in blind. I did not know what it was about. And then I was listening to the audiobook and on my walks, and like finding out what it was about. I was like, wait, do I want to read this? Is this interesting me or is it not? And it did interest me. So I did finish it, and it was good and it was fun. Next, I read The Mysterious Affair at Styles. I think this was the point when I stopped, or like decided that I'm going to stop reading Agatha Christie. But yeah, I don't remember a whole lot about this as well. I think that says enough about itself. Next, I read The Lesbiana's Guide to Catholic School by Sonora Reyes. I really loved this. Check trigger warnings for sure, but I really loved this. I really loved the way a lot of the topics was dealt with. The family dynamics was so well written. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. Next, I read Every Summer After by Carly Fortune. This was another one of my worst reads of 2024, one of the most disappointing books. I loved it up until we got to the truth. It has alternating timelines, and it's written really well, and everything, like the characterization and everything is done so well. And I was so interested in the characters and their story, and even like the female main characters, like her swimming thing and all of these things. Like, I loved it. And then we get to the truth about what happened and why they stopped talking for 12 years. And I was like, I can't believe this. I can't believe I wasted this much time on this book. I did finish it. I skimmed through the rest, which even made me more angry. Like, after the reveal also, like the other reveals that came because of that reveal was like, I can't believe this is how this book ends. So yeah, I hated it, would not recommend. Next was Late Bloomer by Maisie Eddings. This one I'd started and was like almost at a DNF for a really long time, but then I like made myself like finish it. And so for me, a lot of things in this just did not work. I think it was like a more me thing. I think it wasn't meant for me, which was sad because it's queer and it's... Next, I read The Hidden Witch, which is the second book in the Witch Boy series by Molly Knox Ostertag. And this was just as well done, just as good. Next was The Space Between Here and Now by Sarah Sook. This was so good. So well done. Father-daughter relationship done well. Magic realism, time loop, I don't even know what the word is for this, but just done so well. Next was Funny Story by Emily Henry. I really, really enjoyed this one. Premise itself was whack, but like seeing the execution of it was really nice, and also just really nice to read another bookish character in like a different way, like as a librarian this time, and just seeing their relationship evolve and grow, and also like the family dynamics in it and stuff for the female main character was also really interesting to read. Yeah. Next, another like one of my top 10 books maybe this year was The Darkness Outside Us by Elliot Schrefer. This is going to be made into a movie soon, I think, and I am so excited for it. I hope they do it well. But this is a YA science fiction set on a spaceship, and these two characters wake up on the spaceship not remembering a lot of things, and there's like mysterious things going on, and like it's written so well and it's done so well. One of my favorite books. Like I think about this book so often. Please go read it. Yeah. Next was 12th Night by Alexine Farrell Fulmuth, who is also Olivia Blake. And this was my second book. I think this is the second book she's released under this name. And I enjoyed it less compared to My Mechanical Romance. The conflict made a lot of sense, but the resolution felt lackluster, kind of. So, yeah. Next was The Midwinter Witch by Molly Knox Ostertag, the third book in the Witch Boy series. Again, loved it. It was just as good, just as fun, and just as, meaningful, and the message was good. Okay, the next three books. One of my favorite series I read this year. Still think about it. I want to reread it, honestly, ASAP. But that is The Foxhole Court, all for the game series. I read the first book, The Foxhole Court. Then I read The Raven King, the second book, and then I read The King's Men, the third book, and changed my life. I am not the same person I was before I read this book series. Go read it. Check trigger warnings. Like, it's about the characters. It's about rooting for the characters. It's about found family. The book I read after this is like compilation of all the books, all the extras and scenes that the author released as like a separate thing for this book series. So yeah, fantastic. And then after that, I read The Deep Dark by Molly Knox Ostertag. This is probably my favorite book by her. I was in awe of everything. The artwork is good, the message, the magic realism / fantasy aspect to connect to real world issues and stuff. It's just so good. It's just so good. Yeah. And then I read The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston. This was for my book club on Fable and a good start to my book club. It was so fun. It reminded me a lot of like 2000s, early 2000s, like rom-coms, like there's a ghost and only you can see it. And it happens to be your editor's ghost. So good. Then I went through an Anne Liang binge. I finally started my Anne Liang phase. And I'm so glad because I love her works now. Like I am obsessed and will read anything that she writes. And so I started with If You Could See the Sun by Anne Liang. I think I finished this in a day. It was so good. This main girl who like starts disappearing randomly, and then her rival in school ends up helping her out and stuff, kind of. Like, it's so good. So I read that, and then immediately after I read This Time It's Real by Anne Liang, and this one is more of a fake dating story. Yeah, it's good, is what it is. So highly recommend. Okay, next is Martyr by Kaveh Akbar. I really enjoyed this. This was very different from what I usually read, but it was really good. It was written so well. The prose was so poetic. Like, even though I'd guessed what like the main twist was like in the middle, I still really enjoyed it because of like the way it was taught. Next was Welcome to the Hyunam-dong Bookshop by Hwang Boram. This I really enjoyed. I thought it was written really well, and there were a lot of things that were discussed in this that I really, really enjoyed reading about. And I can't remember on like off the top of my head like what those things were, but I remember really enjoying it when I was reading it. And I need to like, I did annotate my book, so I'm going to go back and go through that like after a couple months maybe, and like read those passages again, because I remember how much they impacted me when I read them. So next, I got into a big webtoon phase in June. So the next couple books are webtoons. The first one was Perfect Marriage Revenge by Jerry Ball. I initially wanted to read this because I found out that there's a K drama adaptation of this one. I haven't watched it yet, but I did read this and I really enjoyed it. So, and then the next two books are like season one and season two of one webtoon called She's Hopeless. And this was fun. It was fun. It was a quick, fun read. Probably read that in like one night or something. And then next was Seasons of Blossom. This was a reread. I read the first season of this, which was Bomi's Flower. While when I started it, I hadn't remembered that I've already read it. But as I kept reading, it like clicked for me that I had read this. But I still finished it again because I loved it and I loved the message and the story. I wanted to read the other ones as well, but then I didn't because I remembered those get like progressively more sad and I wasn't in the mood for something sad. And so I only read the first one in that. After that, I reread The Atlas 6 by Olivia Blake because I read the first book in 2021, but never ended up continuing the series. And that was when it hadn't been republished with Tor. And so I read the Tor published version this year. And then I read the second book as well. And the first one, again, was like just as good as I remembered it. It was so well done and so like fleshed out. All characters were so unique and different. And like the storyline, like it was a good mix of plot and characterization for me. And like just the perfect balance, which I really enjoyed. And then we get to the second book and it just like derailed. Like the structural issues, like I was thinking it was like some of the parts were seeming like they were happening within like days and weeks. And then we get to the end of the book and it's apparently been an entire year. And like just a lot of different things that just were not explored as much or dealt with enough that I felt it was very lacking. And so I haven't read the third book yet, but I will probably read it sometime this year just so I can finish the series and see if my thoughts have changed since book two. Like if book three like redeems the series for me. Because the first book was so good, so well done. Next was As Long as the Lemon Trees Grow by Zulfa Katu. And this was again so good with its message and its story. And the writing wasn't my favorite or like my kind, but I still enjoyed it because of its message and of hope and just the portrayal of people and the revolution in Syria. And just yeah, it was just so well done. Next, I read the short story that was a part of the Atlas 6 series called Sacred Hospitality. It's a prequel short story set before the events of Atlas 6. And so, like, we get more of like the character dynamics and stuff. It was interesting to read. Next was a fun, cozy fantasy called Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. This was a fun read about the main character opening up a coffee shop, leaving her old like killing and fighting and all that stuff behind, and then opening a coffee shop in a place where people don't know what coffee is. And it was super fun. I feel like the ending of the book was well done and like so complete that I haven't read the second book and I haven't felt the need to, but I might read it when I'm looking for a cozy fantasy in the future. So yeah. Next was The Princess and the Grilled Cheese Sandwich by Dea Muniz. It's a graphic novel. It's set in like Regency historical times, and all the characters have names that are like cheese, like different kinds of cheese or like inspired by cheese and stuff. And like even the cities and stuff are like different kinds of cheese. And it was just a fun, quick, fun read. Next, I read Briefly a Delicious Life by Nell Stevens, and this was so good. It's been stuck in my head for like since I read it. Like it's so good and it's so unique and so fun. It's about a bisexual teenage ghost from like the 1600s, I think. It's narrated so well, and I just loved hearing the ghost's voice, like, through the story. Like, just hearing her take on things and like the way she would like express herself and stuff. It was just so fun and so good to read. Next was The Whispering Dark by Kelly Andrew. This was my first read by this author, and I want to read more by her because the premise of this was so well thought out and I really enjoyed it. But I think the execution was not as much. And I think from what I remember, this is her debut novel. So I want to give her a benefit of the doubt and try her other books. There's some things I was wishing would have been explored more, but yeah. Next was a short story, fantasy, fairy tale inspired fantasy called A Spindle Splintered by Alex E. Harrow. This was super fun, queer. It's about how she ends up in Sleeping Beauty's like world, like different worlds, like multiverse, and like yeah, it was just done really well. And the friendship was so good. It was explored so well. Yeah, I loved it. Next was another graphic novel, If You'll Have Me by Unni. This was so cute, queer, set in college, and just so cute. Yeah, that's all I have to say. It was so cute. And then after that was I Hope This Doesn't Find You by Anne Liang. I think this one is my favorite so far. This has Rivals to Lovers. It's about this girl who writes a bunch of hate mail, but like never sends them. Like they're all in her drafts, but somehow they end up being sent. Like all her hate mail ends up being sent. And so, like, the repercussions of that. But then there's romance, and it's just so well done. And yeah, again, another book I binge read in one day. Like it was so good. Yeah. After that was Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. This was the third book in the Part of Your World series, but I haven't read the other book, so I don't know anything about it. I really enjoyed it. I really loved it. I was going through a romance drought. I was not in the mood for romance, and this was the book we picked for my book club. So I still ended up reading it, and it was so good. Like, yes, it's about romance, and the romance in it is so good, but also like the mother-daughter relationship, the family relationship, the friendship, so good. All of it was just so good. There's like a twist at the end that's like actually insane that I think about still very often. Like it's so good. Next was Who the F Are You by Huda Fahmy. Graphic novel again, so funny, so lighthearted, and so good. Next was The Ministry of Time by Callie and Bradley. This was a debut science fiction book. The writing is really good, but there were a lot of things that I feel like hadn't been closed or like explored enough by the end. It was good though. It was, yeah. I just wish there was more at the end and like had been wrapped up in a better, more clear way. Next is a book that is in my top 10, maybe in my top 5 of this year. And that is TJ Power Has Something to Prove by Jasmine Kaur Dio. This book, I was not planning on reading this, and I picked it up because I had nothing else to do. And it easily is now, like I said, one of my top 5 books of 2024. It has Rivals to Lovers. It has a lot of discussions on body hair and image and like your inside versus outside, like how you're viewed to other people, but also how you feel in your own skin, and like just a lot of good discussions. And I loved it. I binge read that in one day. I started that in like late afternoon and still ended up reading it. Like I stayed up to finish it because I could not stop, even though like I only started it because I had nothing else to do at that moment. So yeah, really good. And then after that, I read the second book in that Sleeping Beauty, like Alex E. Harrow's duology called A Mirror Mended, where we go back with the same characters and then we go to Snow White's story. The friendship in it is just so well done. And it's a short story, it's a quick read, and like it's just fun to read the subversion, like queer subversion of these fairy tales. So, and then I started a manga series. So a lot of the next books will be manga series. So I started the Witch Hat Atelier series by Kamame Shirahama, and fun time. Like that's all I have to say about it. So I read the next 3 books were the volume 1, 2, and 3 of Witch Hat Atelier. And then I paused on that and read the second book by Huda Fahmy, which was Huda F Cares. Again, super funny, super, lighthearted, and but also discussing a lot of topics and stuff, but like done in just like a humorous, fun way that it was just like so fun to read. Yeah. And then I read the fourth book in the Witch Hat Atelier series. Again, same stuff, same feelings. Yeah. Next was a duology that I finally read, and that was the Stolen Air duology by Holly Black. If you know me, then you know that I love the Cruel Prince series, the Folk of the Air. So I was really excited for Oak and Suren's story, and I enjoyed the first book. I really loved Suren's POV and everything, and it was done really well. I think the second book was less for me, just like I did enjoy it in terms of story and like seeing more of Jude and Carden and like all the other characters and everything. But the second one felt less because there were a lot of things were like limited because it was completely from Oak's perspective. And there were a lot of things that I felt like it would have been better if this one was from Suren's perspective as well. Even though like we did get, or it was dual POV, because I feel like that would have been easier for us to know both their emotions and thought process when they were doing their actions and stuff, taking actions. But because we didn't have Suren's perspective in the second one, like I had a lot of conflicting thoughts about like not understanding the reasons why a character was doing something. So next, I read an entire book series. This was insane. I was really into reading during this time, but so I read the entire Poppy War series by R.F. Kuang after this. 2024 was R.F. Kuang's year for me. I read all her books, basically. And so now I'm caught up to all her books. And we'll probably read Catabasis once it comes out. And then, yeah. Anyways, so I read Poppy War, I read the Dragon Republic, and I read The Burning God, one after the other. And for me, the Dragon Republic was the best one. It was plot heavy, character heavy. Everything was progressing so well and done so well. Yeah. I think again, my issue with R.F. Kong's books is the endings. They all the setup and the build up and the world building is done so well. And like the first two books were really good. And then we get to the third book, and like a lot of it makes sense. Like the reasoning of why the character is doing this and like why it's progressing this way makes complete sense to me. But the way it ends is just not satisfying, or like not even like, I don't know, the execution of it just feels like it's lacking. So yeah, but overall I enjoyed. And the second book was, yeah, I need therapy for that. Yeah. Next, I read You with a View by Jessica Joyce. This was another book for my book club on Fable, and I really enjoyed it. Again, I was still in my romance drought and was not in the mood to read romance, but this one was really fun because, yes, it's romance, but it's also to do with like grief and like family. I loved reading the letters. I loved, yeah, just the way the story was done was really good. And I'm excited to read other books by this author. After that, I read book 5 and 6 of the Witch Hat Atelier series. Again, it did start getting darker, and like as we get through like backstory of Kinfrey and like other characters and stuff, like yeah, but I'm enjoying that. Like I like that we're getting deeper into their backstories and like learning of the dark stuff going on in the witch world. So after that, I read The Reappearance of Rachel Price by Holly Jackson. I did upload a very long video of my entire reading process or reading blog for this book, so you can check it out if you want. But I really enjoyed it. There was something that were predictable, but there were some things that I was very shocked by. So another Holly Jackson book. I loved it. Yeah. Next was The No Show by Beth O'Leary. This was again another book for my book club. And again, I was still in a romance drought, but I still read this. And in the beginning, I was like, is this even romance? Because I hate this guy. Like, I don't understand why this has been labeled as romance when this guy is literally the worst person ever. And then you get through the book and like, or like you get through a certain point in like the middle or something, and like things start clicking. Like there's like hints and it starts clicking and you get to the end. And I was like, an emotional trek. Like it was so good. Yeah, this was probably one of, or maybe like in adult romance, I think this was my favorite one I read in 2024. Yeah, I can't remember any other that was better than this for me. Next was another graphic novel. This was Atana and the Firebird by Vivian So, and beautiful. The artwork was so beautiful, and I'm so excited for book two because unanswered things, there are stuff that I'm waiting for and need to know how it goes. So, yeah. And then after that, I read volume 7 of Which Had Atelier. Again, I loved it. So, after that, I read The Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka, which was my first book by Kafka, and I haven't read anything else yet by him. So, yeah. But this was for a book club and I enjoyed it. It was an experience. I did not know what I was getting into. I went in blind, so I did not know what this book was about, which was very interesting. But it's a short read, and once I like sat with it after finishing it, like once I let my thoughts ruminate, was really good. And like a lot of the things that it's an analogy for and stuff, like makes so much sense. And like a lot of discussions, like it was really thought provoking, is what I'll say. After this, I read one of my most anticipated reads of 2024, and that was Air by Sabaa Tahir. This was the first book in the duology, second book is not out yet, and it's set in the same world as Ember in the Ashes, which is one of my all-time favorite series. And so I was really excited to go back to that world and also to get to meet, you know, Helene and like Elias and like Leia again, but also like to see their kids and like know their story. It was so good. It was so well written. All three characters' POVs just done so well. And it's like, that's the thing. Like, you can, with her books, it's like, you can never really hate anyone because even if they're doing terrible things, you understand why. And it's like, also just never hate anyone or like decide on hating someone because you never know how they're going to switch or how they're going to become, like, once you find out things about them. And then you know, your perspective on them will change because she's done that before with Ember in the Ashes and she will probably do that again. And the pain, the angst, the pain, it's, yeah, need the second book now, hopefully soon. Next, I read another book that is like one of my favorites this year. I can't believe this is a debut novel, like insane. And that is Immortal Dark by Tigest Kurma. What? It's so good. This is all morally black characters, I will say. They do bad stuff. I'm so excited for book two whenever that'll be out because so good. And the ending. Next was A Song to Drown Rivers by Anne Liang. This was her adult fantasy debut, from what I remember. And this was not the same for me. As I love her YA contemporary stuff, but this did not hit as well. I think it needed at least like 100 more pages or something because the world building was lacking and there's a love triangle kind of in it, and one of them just was not believable to me because it wasn't cultivated or like we didn't see that progress. So the entire time I was only rooting for the other one because I actually saw that on page. Yeah. The emotional aspect at the end was really good and I loved that, but it needed more gradual build up, especially in the beginning, like before she goes to infiltrate the enemy kingdom and stuff. Yeah. Next was a book series that I missed out on in like high school and stuff. And I wish I'd read it then because I think I would have loved it so much more if I'd read it then. And that was Stalking Jack the Ripper by Kerry Maniscalco. For me, even in this, like if I was in high school and I'd been reading this then, I would have loved it because I would have loved the main like love interest. But his words and actions and stuff, I did not. Yeah, there were some things like because every other man in her world is like restricting her and not letting her be and stuff, and he's the only one who's not. It's like, oh, he's so different and he's so. But that's not really, yeah, I don't know. I gave it a benefit of the doubt. But people did tell me that the later books in the series are much better. So I will probably continue the series at some point. So, and then after that, I read How to Kill a Guy in 10 Ways by Eve Kelman. This was another one of those books that kind of felt like I was watching a train wreck happen because it started out really well and then it devolved kind of into like more about deterioration of the main character's like mindset and like her just becoming an actual serial killer. Anyways, after that, I read a very cute YA romance, and that was Rules for Rule Breaking by Talia Tucker. This one was so cute and fun and just a quick, fast paced read. I think I read this in like one or two sittings, and yeah, it was fun. After that, I read Check and Mate by Ali Hazelwood. This was, I think, the first YA book she's released, and I loved the chess world. And like, I don't know much about chess at all, so that stuff was flying over my head, but like the tension built through that and stuff was just well done. Yeah. And the main characters, like their chemistry and stuff was through the roof. So yeah. After that, I read Gwen and Art Are Not in Love by Lex Croucher. This was so hyped everywhere that I was like really, really excited for. And so it kind of let me down in terms of that. Like, if I hadn't known about the expectations and stuff, I feel like I would have enjoyed it way, way more. But I did enjoy it overall. And I do want to read more books by this author because I did enjoy it if I don't think about like the hype around the book. Then I read Not in Love by Ali Hazelwood. I was clearly getting back into my romance era. And so I was like, let me try adult books this time. And so I read Not in Love by Ali Hazelwood. This one was not as much for me. I think this was my least favorite Ali Hazelwood book, but I still enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. Like, I did enjoy it, but out of all the ones that I've read, I think this was the least. Yeah. Then the next book was The Breakup Pact by Emma Lord. This one is, I think, her first adult book, because all the ones that I have read is YA or new adult. So I think this was the first that was like adult. And I think also this ended up being my least favorite by Emma Lord, and I've read a lot of her works. And so it honestly could have been that I was just still not in my romance era and like was still in that drought. And so I just shouldn't have made myself read it. Yeah. Oh my God. After that, I really, really got into my mystery era. Mystery era was back on. So the next couple of books are all mystery. So the first 4 books that I read after The Breakup Pact was this 4-book series called The Naturals by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. And this is a YA mystery about a bunch of kids who are hired by the FBI to solve cold cases. That is the premise, like, and that's how it starts out. But like, as you go on, it just gets crazier and wilder and more insane in the best way possible. It's so good. And so I binge read these 4 books in like, I think 3 days. So, or 4 days actually, I think. Yeah. So every day, like, just read one book. And it was the best decision ever because it was so good and so fun. So highly recommend. Next is another YA mystery, and that was Death at Morning House by Maureen Johnson. I've read all the books in the Truly Devious series that have come out so far, so Maureen Johnson is not new to me. And so this one definitely was way less for me than Truly Devious because, one, there are 2 mysteries going on in this book, but they're not connected. So it felt like kind of pointless about why this was set up the way it was. And also, the good thing is, the one thing I got out of this book is that it actually spooked me and scared me. And so I was not able to read this at night, but I was able to read The Naturals at night. Like, I was fine with that. And with Death at Morning House, I could not read it at night. But the mystery was lackluster. The reveal was lackluster. And also, because I've read Truly Devious, there were some reveals or like some like mysteries in this that I was able to guess because I'd read that. And like, it was like a similar mystery in like some aspects. So yeah. After that, I started finally reading Frida McFadden's book. And I started with The Boyfriend by Frida McFadden. And this was her book that came out in 2024. And yeah, fast-paced thriller, mystery. There is some spooky stuff happening. I could not read this at night. And yeah, the twist, I was not able to guess. And it was really good. Yeah. After that, I read Bride by Ali Hazelwood. And it was like, yes, fantasy because of like the werewolves and vampires and stuff. But also like, it wasn't focused as much on that as it was focused on the romance, which I enjoyed. I listened to this on audiobook as well, and it was done really well. So if you do decide to read Bride, I would highly recommend the audiobook. So after that, I read a short story called The Paper Menagerie, which was for a writer's workshop. And this short story is by Ken Liu. And this was so good. I read this in public, not knowing that it would almost make me cry. It made me so emotional. And it's literally like 14 pages, but it really impacted me and like packs a punch. So, yeah, highly recommend reading it. After that, I read We Solve Murders by Richard Osman. This was my first book and definitely not my last by this author. We Solve Murders, so good, so quirky. The characters were amazing. The characterization of all the characters was so well done and just so funny and so humorous, and it's a cozy mystery, very fun. Yeah. Next, I read First Lie Wins by Ashley Elston. This was another book that I read for that reading blog where I was reading like Goodreads nominations lists books. And so this was fun, somewhat. It was very predictable for me because I guessed a lot of the things. It was more thriller and like not like the scary thriller, but more action thriller. It felt kind of reminded me of like Mr. and Mrs. Smith, the movie. And so, yeah. Next was a romance book. It was called Match Me If You Can by Swati Hegde. This is, I think, the author's debut novel. It's a modern adaptation of Emma by Jane Austen. And so it's set in Mumbai in an Indian setting, and it has the main girl, matchmaking and stuff, and then her longtime friend, and there's like childhood friends to lovers and stuff. I did enjoy the writing, so I do want to read more of her works. But I think for me in this, there were some plot points and stuff that are rooted to the original stories that these are adaptations of. And those plot points I did not enjoy. Other than that, I did enjoy the writing. So I'm looking forward to reading more stuff by this author. Yeah. Next was an audiobook called Two Can Play by Ali Hazelwood. This was a quick short story audiobook and super fun. I enjoyed it. I read this literally in like one walk, like one evening walk, and it was just a fun time. After that, I read Finlay Donovan is Killing It by El Cosimano, and this was fun as well. This was super fun. I was not expecting for the story to have progressed the way it progressed, but it was still fun and I enjoyed the ending. And I do want to read the rest of the books in this series because I have them. So then the second last book of 2024 was ASAP by Axio. This is the second book in the XOXO series. I read the first book, XOXO, in 2022 and I really enjoyed it. And this one was super fun too. It was nice to go back to that world and also to like, it kind of felt like I was like reading a K-drama. So it was really fun. Yeah. And then last book that I read was again for my book club, and that was The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden. This has been on my TBR for so long, but it did not meet my expectations. Again, the hype around this book is so like, there's so much hype around this book, but I was not expecting it to go the way it did, which is why I think it was like hard for me to pick it up at times. But once I did like leave that thought behind and like continued reading, I did enjoy it. And hopefully I can read the second and third book, like the rest of the books in the series this year. Yeah, my initial expectations that I had because of the hype and also because of the name did not match up. This was more like folk tales, like folklore, Russian tales inspired fantasy. And that was not what I was expecting. But it was good. And the characterization was done really well. Yeah. Anyways, those were all the 136 books that I read in 2024 and what I thought about them. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you made it this far, that's great. That's great. I will see you guys next time, next Monday, 5 p.m. IST. I hope you guys are having a great 2025 and a great January, and I hope the rest of the year goes well for you guys. Bye.